Good evening. Welcome back to the Glazov gang. Our gang members this evening: Andrew Klavan, world-renowned and critically acclaimed adult thriller writer. He is also a black belt in karate. Evan Sayet, the #1 conservative comedian in the United States. He's got an incredible show coming up at Westlake Village on March 25th. Do not miss it. He's the funniest man in America. Go to his website, evansayet.com, and find out all the...
I was wondering if you were going to forget the name of my website again.
Okay, I'm doing good. And Eric Allen Bell, filmmaker and writer and modern-day intellectual. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Before we begin, Evan, you were feeling a bit bad about a comment you made about Eric's hair in the last segment.
No, I wasn't feeling bad at all about it. I'm a little nervous around him because I have so many romance thrillers that with him on the cover.
And you were great in Planet of the Apes.
I'm sorry I'm sitting between these guys now.
Maybe that's why they put you there.
It's getting hot in here. Gentlemen, a story in the New York Times on Scott Ritter recently. He's the guy, guy that was a big, voice in rallying against the war in Iraq and the invasion. Caught with underage girls, he finally got a 5.5-year sentence, or they said up to 5.5 years. New York Times was pointing out today something about his character in the sense of very arrogant, refusing to admit he's done anything wrong. What exactly is the story here? I want to talk about it a little bit. Andrew, what were your impressions of this whole tale?
Well, first, to be fair to old Scott, he didn't actually do anything with underage girls. He was caught online talking to lawmen posing as underage girls. And that was his actual defense. I knew they were lawmen all along. That's why
But he went, in 2 other cases, he went there on the pretense to, excuse the language, but to masturbate in front of them. Yeah, but he didn't end up doing it.
Yeah. Well, the guy obviously, he has come across for a long time as a very obsessive, self-righteous guy, a very disturbed guy. And I read the Times piece, and I found it interesting because it seemed to take place in this New York Times fantasy world in which it was now absolutely determined that not only had there been no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but the entire thing was kind of a fraud, instead of the fact that every single intelligence agency in the world, in the Western world, had declared that there were these weapons of mass destruction, that every politician...
Even the nations that opposed our going to war admitted that he had weapons of mass destruction, but thought there might be other ways.
So assuming...
just a second, where were they?
What?
Clear this up for us.
Where were the weapons of mass destruction? Well, the number of weapons of mass destruction that would have had to have been there, and I don't know if they were there or not, would have fit in a normal 2-car garage. Mm-hmm. If you think about the size of Iraq, very difficult to find, very easy to smuggle out of the country.
Also very difficult to find 2 cars in Iraq.
And a 2-car garage. Okay. But very easy to smuggle out of the country.
So you don't, the piece called him, the piece called him clairvoyant on Iraq. You disagree with that. You don't think that he was a prophet in any way.
I thought there's somebody in there said even a stopped clock is right twice a day, and I think that's probably, if in fact there were no weapons of mass destruction, I think that's probably right of Scott Ritter.
Before we keep going about Iraq, just about Scott Ritter in general, what's the story here?
Well, he looks like a man with a serious mental problem.
Now, you're a good psychologist. Was there something connected to the noise he made about Iraq and then the way he was engaged maybe in this behavior?
No,
Are there any connections?
I think anybody, even people who do much better things than Scott Ritter has done in public life, can have private peccadillos and sins. I mean, that's just something. You don't throw stones at the guy. If he's bothering underage girls, you put him away. But look, anybody can have a little peccadillo, strange thing in his head
Is this your Christianity coming out? The forgiveness? You're very forgiving, Andrew.
In Iran, actually, you throw stones at the underage girl.
Just a sec. Now, Eric, I saw you getting very angry because you disagree with the Iraqi perspective.
Well, there's 2 parts of this story. I disagree with the Iraq War. I don't think we should have gone in.
Okay.
So there's that. But when I hear the Scott Ritter story, probably not. There's a human dimension that I think has nothing to do with partisanship or the Iraq War.
1 second. You think that Iraq is worse off today than it was under Iraq, correct?
I don't know for sure, right? But that's the impression I get.
Okay, all right.
That it's worse off today than it was under Saddam Hussein, and that it's heading in a bad direction with fighting between Sunnis and Shias, and
that's bad.
And going
Why?
the way of Islamists, because it was
likes
less
civil war between
radical.
Two bad guys. I
think it was less religiously radical under the tyranny of Saddam Hussein, which was also awful.
Okay, go ahead. But tell us a bit about.
So there's
Scott
a human
Ritter.
dimension to this that crosses all lines of partisanship and so forth. What Jung would call the shadow, something within the unconscious. We all have a dark side, and if you're a priest or if you're a self-righteous person who points the finger for a living, then the tendency is to bury your dark side, and it goes underground where you can't see it, and it can get you into trouble. And I think that's a human phenomenon, not something that happens to lefties or something that only happens to people who oppose the Iraq War.
That's right. I agree.
Evan, how do you see this whole thing? You have a big
first of all, I was
stance on the age of consent.
Well, first of all, I was a little confused when I read the story because they said up to 5.5 years, and I thought they were talking about the girls he was dating. As far as the weapons of mass destruction, you've got a guy who has used weapons of mass destruction. You've got a guy who has shown himself willing to do the most horrific things, and he is saying, I've got weapons of mass destruction. How can you do anything other than assume that he does? Whether he did or he didn't, and he was trying to fake out Iran or any number of things, you've got this guy who's committed murders, holed up in a house, and he yells out, I've got a gun. You assume he's got a gun.
So you support the invasion of Iraq?
I support the liberation of the Iraqi people.
Yeah, but that hasn't actually happened.
It certainly has.
Using that criteria, then why don't we go into North Korea?
For very obvious reasons. Saddam Hussein, the Middle East, is at the crossroads of 3 continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe. North Korea is holed up way up here, not able to spread the evils that they might or might not spread. I mean, there's any number of reasons why you choose to go into one place and not another. So usually the question...
Wait a minute. But there was a great danger.
No, seriously. That's the leftist way.
If you look at a map of Iraq today and you see where the American and British oil companies are, where they weren't, I think that's rather telling.
I don't think it's
rather
telling.
As far as why did we go into Iraq?
No, I don't think it's rather telling. What you're doing is you're looking after the fact that something and then trying to use that as a motive for what took place.
No, you're saying that let's just rewind the clock to the people who are
go.
against the war, saying this is about oil, and now we go to the present day and go, wow, look,
no, but a lot of
we got our oil companies.
A lot of the people against the war were being paid off by the oil companies through the oil for food program.
I got to tell you something else, though.
Wait, let Andrew finish.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Let me say that I think that George W. Bush had a very poorly explained plan, but it was a plan that he felt that we could no longer take the laissez-faire attitude we had taken in the Middle East. And he wanted to go into Iraq, partially because of the weapons of mass destruction, but really I think he wanted to create a democratic buffer zone between Iran and Syria, and he wanted to begin the reformation of the Middle East. I think that that's the issue. The issue is, was that too ambitious a program? Was that a possible program? Yeah. If it was a possible program, if something actually had to be done, then in fact I agree with the war in Iraq. I thought that was a winnable war. I thought we did win it. I thought we won it, and then Obama surrendered it. I think a lot of the problem that's happening now is because of campaign promises Obama made that were wrong.
Well, wait a minute. The war is not lost, is it? We won in Iraq.
We did win, but I think now we've lost the win. You know?
But you mean that it might be going into
peace.
You mean it might be going into the sphere of Iran?
I don't see how it cannot fall apart with us withdrawing.
Do we agree, therefore, that the idea of nation building in the Muslim world is flawed?
The idea of nation building anywhere is obviously flawed, and the idea of nation building without really being an imperial power, without really... America has never wanted to be an empire, and it's never accepted the burden of empire, and yet sometimes we've acted imperially, and I think that that's a problem, to one or the other. And
we have to be more ruthless.
It's bad PR.
Evan?
It's bad.
I think that the Arab Spring was what George Bush had in mind when he said, okay, we will have this democratic buffer zone, we will show that it's possible. Then the Iranians rose up, and unfortunately we had a president who said to the mullahs, to the ayatollahs, basically go ahead and kill them, it won't affect our relationship. Compare that to what Ronald Reagan would have done had there been this democratic uprising in Iran. He would have said to the Iranian, they weren't students, the Iranian opposition, you've got a friend and ally here. We're going to do everything we can to help you. Go for it. And they were crushed, basically, because Barack Obama said to the Ayatollahs, go ahead and kill them, and I will still do business with you.
Eric, some thoughts on what's been said?
I agree with a lot of what he said.
Looking back, George Bush, great president. What
Horrible.
You'll
Worst thing to happen.
You'll get there.
Worse? Do you think he's worse than Obama?
Yes.
Evan?
I think he did a lot of very good things. I think that I wouldn't rank him as the best president of the 20th century, or 21st century, I guess it would have been.
Okay. Andrew?
I thought he was a Bill Clinton-level president called upon to be a Winston Churchill, and he wasn't. He was not a great man, and he stumbled into great man times, and he just couldn't live up to that.
I like George Bush very much, so just for you to stay in the Glazov gang, can you at least say something nice about Ronald Reagan?
Yes, his eyes weren't as close together as George Bush's.
Okay.
That's a liberal argument.
15-minute conclusion from each of you on Scott Ritter, the individual, and what you thought of this whole thing and him going to jail and his arrogance and talking to the judge, etc.
Right. I never believed that his arguments were made because he truly believed and he knew and he had secret information that nobody else in the world had. I thought it was politically motivated and that bad things have happened to him since. I guess I'm sorry, but I'm really not.
Do you judge him for what he got caught with?
Well, it's reprehensible that he was trying to have sex with underage people. That's also a different issue than his trying to undermine our ability to liberate the Iraqi people.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, what do you think about him saying that he knew they were FBI agents? It's bizarre.
It's such a stupid excuse as to be comical. I mean, that's like how stupid are you? You actually make a pass at a FBI agent.
It's almost like Pee Wee Herman when he falls on the bicycle. I meant to do that.
Yeah, I meant to do that. Yeah.
Final comment goes to you, Eric, on this segment.
I think that anybody who's trying to be a predator sexually should. I'm glad they got him. Yeah. I'm glad they gave him time. His politics are irrelevant. What he was doing was horrible, and thank God they caught him.
Join us tomorrow night when we discuss with these three titans Quran burning in Afghanistan.